And 3, 2, 1, liftoff. Greetings, friends. Gemini Brett here with a special guest at StarryTelling Hour today. I'm happy to introduce PK, who actually I met through the comment thread during a StarryTelling Hour. I've seen you active and adding amazing comments over, I don't know, probably months, but it was a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about base 12 and such, where PK was sharing amazing comments that made it quite clear that he knew a lot more about the topic than I. And so PK and I set up a private meeting where we talked, unfortunately, only for like 30 minutes. But the good news was we didn't get to go that deep before I just asked, hey, can we just do this live in front of the audience online? Because it was a really fun conversation that began. And the title today that I chose was Spirit Means Breath, because I think that's the first thing you said to me, PK, when we connected. And
Yeah.
and then we like went back to ancient Greece, which we're going to do a bit today. So I took some time this morning to get through the files and to dig up this image of the one time that I got to visit Greece. This is in Athens. And this is the so-called Tower of the Winds, which is an 8-sided tower. So the 8 winds are there around the top. And then this is an ancient water clock. And so this is said to be the clock that many of the, maybe even most of the astrologers who were working in Athens, Greece, would use to get the time, right, and to know what's on the rise and all of that. So back to Athens we go, and who knows where our mystery tour will take us today. But greetings and welcome to the StarryTelling podcast,
Thank
PK.
you. Thanks for having me, man. I'm happy to be here and happy to share some things with everyone. I've come to thanks to technology and such, come to have a better understanding of Greek that kind of self-taught here. So just a disclaimer. As you should everything, take everything with a grain of salt, including what's going to be coming from my mouth, because again, I am self-taught. I don't have a PhD and such, but I feel like you don't really need one. You can kind of learn what you want to these days, and that's one of the beautiful things about the sometimes good, sometimes bad technology world that we live in.
Yeah, it's kind of what you make of it, right? And if I spent
Absolutely.
more of my time just educating myself and exploring amazing topics rather than getting lost in some of the rabbit holes that I do, like the technological world would be a more productive place for me. It's always nice to be reminded of that. Um, yeah, well, our conversation last week kind of quickly went into etymology and the importance of ancient languages. And it's something that I have not studied at all. I know I'm absolutely criminal in mispronouncing Greek words, and I'm always
Same,
asking,
same.
right? So please, friends, do forgive us for some of the improper pronunciations along the way today. But I guess this journey helps us see that there is worth to pursuing etymology, like linguistic roots, and getting back into the old languages. So, PK, I guess just steer this ship, and I'm excited to find out where we will go.
Yeah. Yeah. So first, I think it's fitting that we start with spirit. And really, I do kind of forget why I said that. There was definitely a reason that, I brought up, like, oh, breath is spirit, like, that, right? And I don't know, it's just weird. I can't recall what prompted me to say that to you. Do you recall? So any
I have no
it's kind of,
idea, but I
yeah,
do
kind of
remember
doesn't matter.
replying with, "No, I don't know that, and I'm
Right.
happy to." And
And I get so excited when I can share things with people. And so one thing I'll do here is we'll start with this, the spirit, meaning breath. And so if you just look at the, standard etymology online, which is sometimes great, sometimes not so great, but as is everything, spirit in here is the life, the animating vital principle in man and animals. And so there is this thread when you get into the Bible where pneuma is the Greek word. I'm just using Strong's here, that gets translated to spirit or ghost. But also interestingly, it is the wind. So you could think about it too. The let's say the Hebrew equivalent is the ruach. So the ruach Elohim, right, is the spirits that moved upon the waters in Genesis. And so that is the same spirit, the same breath. You can see how all these things where what's interesting in the Greek is that they don't always, this pneuma is not always translated as spirit. It's not really always translated as breath. It sometimes is spirit, it's sometimes breath, and it's sometimes wind, used in a very like standard way. Literally, the wind that blows the sails of ships will be said as in pneuma as well. So it's just very interesting that it has that, you could say like non-spiritual meaning to it, where it's just kind of literally the stuff that blows around, that we feel on our face, right?
Right, and English words that come to mind are like pneumonia, right, which is a lung condition. Although there's a serious wetness considered there, and then also like pneumatics, right? So, because I'm an engineering nerd coming from like
Absolutely.
air-driven machines.
Absolutely. That's all it. And so isn't it interesting? Yeah, that's the same. You're hitting it spot on. That's the same root here of pneuma. So who'd have thought pneumatics is the same root of spirit in the Bible? You know, it's pretty much the same word. Just like I said, used in a more literal way, like the wind blowing on your face or blowing a sail. So that's really cool. The pneuma of it all. The one thing I want to go into, kind of switching gears here. Do you have anything, questions or anything about pneuma or
Well, I
spirit?
want to share that this comment came in from Mystical Rainbow Casey of uh, conspiracy. Right.
Love it.
There's a missing I because I'm not a conspiracist, but means conspire, right? To breathe together. So Scorpio Brett, or Scorpio Joe, as I like to call myself also now, like very much appreciates that. And there is one thing here, which is that I feel like air can get a really bad rap in our day of kind of like four elemental analysis, right? That we often kind of think of fire as this like spiritual, you know, divine flame, and the water as the feelings, which are obviously something we need to promote more of in modern times, and the earth, the body, and the embodiment, but there's so many kind of turn off the mind, and the mind is getting in the way trainings that I come across these days. So one thing that I just feel like appreciation for in having these winds blow our sails into this particular ocean at the beginning of our journeys is like, there's something very spiritual about that airy essence. And a conspiracy I like, or just sharing air, right? And sharing words and those kinds of things. So that's, I guess, a bit of what I would have to share.
For sure. And what makes, how do you stoke a fire? With air, right? You got to give it air. So it's like, air is the necessary to have a fire.
And when
Um,
it's gone, the fire goes out, or fire expires. So here's a nice piece that Winter added as well, right? Like this, the spirit being released from the body, is that's why we say we expire with our last breath.
exactly. So, okay, a couple of things with the whole conspire weave. Another interesting little Latin etymology. Context means at the core of it, it's like to weave together. So that's a fun one when we're talking about context, because there's a saying like uh what is it? Content is king or something. Um, but there's one where it's like, well, but then context is God. So it's kind of like the whole weaving together of it. elevates the context a little bit. And so real quick about the spirit thing here and I guess aliveness. Let me ask you a question, Brett. How, as being a new father, here's something that I know you've done before because I know every father, every mother does this. You look at your little perfect sleeping baby there, and how do you know that she's okay? Have you ever watched her so closely? It's like you want to make sure she's breathing, right?
Absolutely.
She looks
Yeah.
so
And I mean,
peaceful.
even like late
Mhm.
night when there's a break and we're watching her through a baby monitor screen and her face might be in the pillow and it's like, oh my God, right? Like
Right.
that's when you need to
Right.
run upstairs and make sure she's cool. But yeah, I mean, even there, I can just kind of see her like, her tides and just see
Mhm.
her kind of up and down. Yeah. So
Yep,
absolutely.
exactly. So, okay, here's another question for you. So, we've just established one way to check if something is alive. Okay, I'm sorry if this is crude, but anyway, you see that it's breathing. Okay,
Mm,
another way to check something is alive. You poke it with a stick.
mm,
So, just I'm gonna leave it here, but I'll say real quick. It reminds me of kind of what went down in 2020 with we'll just say breaths and poking going on. So
mm,
take that for what it's worth, or wherever that sits with you. Um, but want to move into this more Greek and let's say important concepts with Greek and how it's translated. And so, what I'm looking at here, we are looking at Plato's Republic, and we got the Greek on the left, and we got the English on the right. And so, in our previous conversation, we did kind of briefly mention nous. And so, if you guys out there aren't familiar with nous, nous typically gets translated to the divine mind. I believe it got pretty popularized with the Hermetic philosophy and the talk of the nous being kind of God's mind, right? And so I was thinking about this word nous, and first let's back up a little bit. Plato's Republic, Plato in general, okay? Aside from Plato's Timaeus is a work by Plato, and it was kind of the one and only known work of Plato pre Ficino, Marcello Ficino. And so we're talking, he was born in like 1400 something. So before then, Plato was Timaeus. That's all it was. Now, Ficino is the one that brought us what he did was he translated the ancient Greek Plato into Latin and kind of then made it popular and spread throughout. So we kind of have Ficino and around there to thank for kind of getting Plato out, all the rest of the books, right? Aside from Timaeus. Now, what's also interesting about that, there was a big kind of like debate discussion as to because they also had the Corpus Hermeticum there. And so there's this big discussion with Ficino and I guess the king or whoever was in charge of him. Think there's some church in there as well. To what should we translate first? Should we get you to work on Plato or should we get you to work on the Corpus Hermeticum? And anyway, at the end of the day, what happened is they translated Plato first, followed by the Corpus Hermeticum. Why I even bring this up is because in here you could see we have nous. Nous is this word right here. It looks like a V, but the V is a new in ancient and Greek. So it's nous. Kind of looks like noun. So this nous gets translated to reason. Over here, you can see truth and reason. Now, below in the same book, Plato's Republic, we have logo, which Yeah, some of you may be familiar with the logos, right? The Bible. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Well, the way is the logos. And so here, logos is a very loaded word. We go on all day about logos, but also it's the word. The word basically is what it gets translated to in the Bible most times. So, but logo here is reason. So you can see in the same book, in the same Plato Republic, we got reason, and you can see logo over here. And so this gets into kind of what is reason and what is mind. And so when I was just thinking about this, kind of preparing, thinking through about this show and about Noose and the divine mind. And so what it came to me is that, well, maybe divine mind isn't really a bad translation. Maybe we are so noun centric that perhaps it's more correct to think of mind as a verb, as in, do you mind? Mind your manners. You better mind your parents. And so this kind of relates to the divine mind being the reason. And then what's another way to say what's the reason that you do something? It's the final cause. So see how this all kind of relates to, and don't you see how it then changes really your perspective if you think of divine mind as a verb instead of a noun? That maybe then it's like, okay, what is the reason for the sun? It's the divine mind. And it's not something really we could comprehend other than say it's the divine reason.
Right. And maybe verbs and nouns are one and the same if thinks are things, right? So that's like Alan Watts, who I love so much. He really tries to remind us in playful ways that we're creating our reality, right? So be careful what you to bring your consciousness to or focus upon, because you will actually, through your own narrations of your experience, you might be creating what you see, right? So I like this image of noose, but it begins with that new and it ends with it as well. So might it actually say noun? And it's that
That
kind of
might say
spirit, like
noun. Yeah.
creating the world through the air too. You kind of see some of that image.
Yeah, totally. That does say noun there, because it's interesting that, when I was making this graph, I didn't catch that. Typically the noose is Nous. It's a final sigma. So it's very interesting that cognate, you could say, of noose is this. Um, so let's
Oh, I just want to check in. One of you wrote that you're having a hard time reading this online. I see you're on YouTube. You can probably click the settings wheel in the lower right and choose what resolution you're watching the
mhm.
video in. I did just go check on YouTube and see that I was able to change it to 720 and everything looked clear enough there. If it's not clear for you, looking back at the recording of this will be helpful. But
Yeah,
hopefully just hear PK kind of taking us on the tour through these.
I'll try to zoom in more too. I'll keep that in
Thanks.
mind. Yeah. So, I'm seeing in the chat here, I love this. Like, what is knowing? You know, and getting down to this knowing and understanding is quite the rabbit hole. And one thing I think that it's important is because if you study philosophy, a lot of people will say that Plato was kind of, the first, it's kind of the bedrock of modern philosophy, his stuff. And then, so we'll just say Plato has had a very big impact on the world. And then the other thing that's had a very big impact on the world is, of course, the Bible. And so it's very, which was written in the New Testament, at least was written in ancient Greek, which so was Plato. And so it's really interesting looking at these words and comparing them to each other and seeing kind of these similarities where some things don't necessarily add up, and then kind of seeing if there's anything to take away from that. So I like this question, right? What is knowing? What is knowledge? Because there's different types of knowledge, which I'll put forward just as there are different types of ignorance. And so one thing here with the first form of knowledge that we'll go over is the gnosis or gnosis. A lot of people may be familiar with this word already, but essentially it is translated in the Bible as knowledge. Knowledge, knowledge, knowledge. You'll look at it all the way down until, look at this. Then you got in 1 Timothy 6:20, and I'm looking just at the KJV here. All of a sudden, this gnosis is science. And so here we could start to see maybe a conflation of ideas and terms that are, I would say, are very important when you're reading Plato or the Bible, you know? So that
I think the New American Version translates science as Fauci.
quite possibly.
Ching.
It very much it might. So
well, let me stop you there though, because so that King James version of taking gnosis from knowledge to science, like what do you think we lose in that translation? Or maybe I could ask, what does science mean? Like how closely is it related to knowledge?
Right. So let me look up this here. There's another word. Are you familiar with the term epistemology?
Yeah, but also not familiar enough for me to define it. So would you define it for us?
Perfect. Yeah. The epistemology is the theory of knowledge. So epistemology, again, it comes from a Greek word. And the Greek word is epistemi. Let's see if it's here. No. So let me just look up epistemi, Greek. And thanks for bearing with me, but here it is. So
yeah,
this...
There's a question here in the comments of, do I remember from a lecture that Dr. William Morris gave the other day that we were both in attendance of, where he was speaking about declinations and medical astrology, but he had like a really cool bit where he was, I mean, it was clear, though he didn't express it so I don't know. He didn't say the quiet part out loud, I guess, but it's clear that he was kind of looking back at this time of just trust the science and yada yada. Where he's like, science isn't the information. Like science is used to get to the information, right? Science isn't knowledge. Like science would be a process, an application that we use to find our way to the knowledge, right?
Yeah, I love that. That's yeah, kind of exactly where I wanted to go with that, because here I'm using a tool called Lima List, and it just searches certain documents for a certain word. And what I'm looking for here is the epistemology word or a cognate of it. And so what's interesting here is that epistemology, episteme in here gets translated as knowledge. Now, we just went over gnosis, that gnosis is knowledge. But you could see how ancient Greek was such a rich language. A lot of you may know that there were, I want to say maybe like 9 different words for love, where, we just have love, but there's like agape and there's 9, but it's like agape for some reason. It's the only one I could think of right now. But many different words.
Just enter Pisces, so that's probably the right place to be.
Yeah, there's like, brotherly love, romantic love, love for your family, the love, loving to do something, all different kinds of love, and we just say love. And so this too, getting into the knowledge of epistemi. Epistemi, the etymology of it means like through standing. Histemi means like to stand. And so it kind of relates to the use of understanding. This is kind of like through standing. And so the epistemi, the epistemology is different than gnosis, because gnosis is kind of a higher knowing, where they say in the Bible, Adam knew Eve, right? That knew there, that know is gnosis. That's a different kind of knowing than the epistemology. I don't even see epistemology in the Bible yet. Interestingly enough, we got nous here. It gets translated to understanding. And here you see again with the mind. So a lot of minds and a lot of understandings. But my point is where you could quickly see with us reading these old texts in English, I would ask, are we not maybe losing some sort of meaning when, we just have one word for a certain concept where they're using different words, to describe stuff. So they have different types of knowledge and we just get knowledge.
Right. Well, I mean, this takes me into this question of what's the difference between knowledge or knowing and understanding. And there is a difference there in my book. And then just also very importantly, like Rhonda says here, unfortunately, the modern trend is to diminish our language even further. I mean, I listened to a rant recently about how big words is racism. And just my fear of like that type of training that's going to kind of contribute to even like subconscious or unintentional memory holding, to use, an Orwellian term, is kind of terrifying. Olive mentions here that she really likes Robert Anton Wilson's term for gnosis, which is like to grok something. But then, interesting, like that's the AI at the X platform.
Totally.
Right?
Totally. Yep.
And, like grokking a thing, like really getting a thing, like where it's kind of like understanding and knowledge. Are they one and the same? I feel like PK, our journey's taken us to this place where we should maybe take 9 moments to explore these 9 words of love, and see what comes of it. So, this is at GreeceHighDefinition.com. Just came up through a quick search online. So we have eros, right?
Was I right with 9? Did they say 9?
They did, yeah. Like the more common thing that showed up was 8.
8, okay.
And then I saw 7 as well.
Yep.
But you said
9.
And, I'm like, more love the merrier, right?
Yeah, right on.
So eros meaning sexual desire. And I mean, I like this. It's common to mistake lust or sexual desire for romantic love, but sure. I wonder also, is eros just lust? It's also kind of hard to hear lust and not think of that in some negative connotation sometimes, which that might be just my own trip to get over. But it's nice to hear eros. Like I don't think of that, in terms like erotic and erotica as like negative in any way, right?
Right.
So
right.
What would this be? Philia?
Yeah. So like think philosophy, love
right.
of wisdom. Yeah.
And that type of soul connection.
Pedophile. Right? The love
of golly.
You see?
Somebody scrubbed that one off. We
the
just
word,
got demonetized. Anyway, yeah, interesting.
That's the word.
Well, and what other places where that root, I should say, is used in words that I might be more appreciative of course, philosophy. But yeah, this kind of idea of like really knowing someone, right? Like for me, in some regards, and this might just be the Gemini in me, like that might be the most intimate type of love, Storge, so devoted love. It's a variation of that knowing, relates to love within a family, right?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one. So what's that? Okay.
I
Huh.
mean, that feels like that's that one of the unconditional love, and even the thing that keeps us from breakups when there's
Right.
an argument, when we walk by a house that just burned down and talk about picking a lemon from. Oh, sorry, I'm actually in my own world from this morning. But like we love somebody so much, thick or thin, that type of thing. Like I'm hearing that in that type of devotion. Like a devotion, a dedication in that regard means that we're going to stay loving regardless. Interrupt me if necessary to add anything that's coming through for you here. And I can't see the chat, PK. So if you see something there too you want to bring in, please do.
Okay.
Pragma, that's interesting, right? So think of pragmatic. I don't associate that in any way with love. I feel like that's the only word I'm familiar with where I hear pragma.
Let me what's that Greek? It's P what is that? Um yeah, PRAG. So keep going. I'm
Cool.
gonna
So we can take
look that
that
up real
back
quick.
into the. So they say, although probably the least exciting type of love, it's an essential component of making relationships work in the long term. Pragma is love based on duty, reason, and shared goals. And so maybe what I was hearing in that storage is actually a little bit more in the pragma.
Yeah, I'm
You can
seeing
really.
stuff like that which has been done. That's what pragma is, like a deed or an act. So that
Mm,
might be kind of like necessity, sort of. Yeah, essential.
yeah, and it's fun to just kind of hear like different astrological archetypes in these different loves. All right, ludus, playful love,
See, that's a
the
new one to me
opposite of
too.
pragma. This is like dolphin love, right? It's like dancing for the sake of dancing. Um, Often expressed through flirting and teasing. Oh, that was a Freudian slip, I guess. Expressed through flirting and teasing, seduction, casual sex, and the like. The thrill um, is a form of ludus. These relationships are not necessarily selfish or shallow. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting in this paper. They kind of are describing types of relationships to these different types of love. I mean, it feels to me like all of these loves will be present, maybe in any relationship in some kind of balance, or perhaps in the most successful relationships, they're all there.
One
Mania,
I
obsessive
saw
love.
saw in the chat real quick. It a little while back. Someone says something about Philadelphia, right, and meaning brotherly love, right?
Right, for the
Now,
filial.
yeah, and so that's really interesting because I was just thinking about Philadelphia the other day. I'm from outside of there, but I never knew this in my whole life. So the Phila and the brotherly aspect of that word comes from the Greek word they say is Delphos, basically Delphos.
Mm,
Now, if you know anything about the founding of our country and the Greek and the Masons, and just go look at all the statues, and okay, they liked some Greek for sure. Philadelphia, what else do you see in that word? You see Delphi.
mm-hmm,
So, right, think about the oracles at Delphi. What was that? The oracles of Apollo. So it's interesting. I think that maybe this Philadelphia, the like exoteric is like, okay, we're tell everyone that it means brotherly love. Delphos, it's right there. But I think maybe too, it could mean the lovers of Delphi, meaning the
mm,
lovers of the oracles, of the mysteries, you know?
mm. Which sounds very resonant. Now, many of the names of cities and such that are here in the States obviously reach back into older places. Like Memphis is a great example, the old capital of the land we now call Egypt. Many of them just coming from England and whatnot, like Boston, etc. Is Philadelphia a place that's on Earth otherwise? Or, I mean, as you're reaching it, I mean, bringing it back to
Philadelphia
Delphi,
was in the
Delphi.
Bible. Mhm.
It's in the Bible.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's in
Yeah.
the Bible. It's one of the, 7 churches.
Interesting.
In Revelation. Yeah. Philadelphia.
Wow. And so do you feel that in the Bible that's also a reference to Delphi? I mean, that's New Testament, obviously, Revelation, so that would have
Yep.
been written in the Greek. It'd be interesting to see what Greek word was used um, to what we're
Yeah, for
translating as Philadelphia, right? Might be a clue there. All right, well, let's do a little bit more of this love. So brotherly love or the love for the oracle, where do those exist in this list of 9? All right, so ludus, playful love; mania, obsessive love.
yeah, that's interesting. So that one, it makes me think of, all right, how many of these words actually gets translated to love? Because I know mania does not. Um, Typically mania, when you see mania, you'll see madness. Um, also sometimes it's I think where kind of inspiration comes from. Possessed by the muses is the divine mania.
Right. And so I like that is a love for me, right? It can be dangerous, but like right now I'm building a course for Synchronicity University. And it's like one of my happy places. I mean, I get crazy obsessive. I woke up at 3 in the morning with just this image of like a way I wanted to change this animation that I'm creating for the course. And I'm just at it, and then it's hard for me, like when family responsibility basically wakes up on the other side of that wall. Um, to like get taken away from this thing. Like I used to be able to just obsess uninterrupted, right? And now it's like, okay, cool. I need to like actually be a little bit more pragmatic about my mania and like have my mania hours. You know what I'm saying? Which is like
Yeah.
a weird thing to play with. But yeah, I know that like that is like a love for me, right? When I get in that state, it's a very dangerous kind of love. I've also gone into very obsessive types of loves in my life and broken hearts and all those things too. So, um, where would this one be? Meraki?
Hmm. That's
And it's a
another one I'm not familiar
modern
with.
Greek word derived from the Turkish.
It's modern
There's,
Greek.
it means to do something with love, creativity, and devotion when you wholeheartedly put yourself into what you are doing. I mean, yeah, that sounds a lot like the mania to me as well. But so, like, we're hearing practice here, right? So, well, but it says you do not have to paint a gorgeous portrait of your partner or compose a stunning piece of music for them to express your love. Making a nice dinner is perfect. Okay, thanks. Yeah, maybe so. That's maybe why there's 8 in some lists and 9 in the others, of more modern
Sure.
contributions.
Yeah, they probably didn't include that.
So here we get the kind of philia showing up again. And so
Yes.
this is like,
Self-love.
my lack of language is like, oh, that one just sounds like those two combined. But here we get like the self-love.
You're right, though. It totally does. I'm
Yeah,
not familiar with that. What is it? UTIA
here's the Greek.
word. Mm-hmm.
Prerequisite to loving others, right? I mean, it's something we teach a lot, something we have to learn, no doubt. It's fun too. This course I'm creating is for the heavenly houses, and there's a lot here that where it's like, yeah, we really need to do the 5th and the 6th house before we can get to the 7th in a good way. Um, but okay, interesting. And then, last on the list is the one that came first to
Agape.
mind,
Right.
right? That unconditional love, the T spirit. And I always know that as we are all one, right? And so loving all the children as if they are our own because I am you and all the things. All
Mm-hmm. And
right, let me post this link for that article in the chat here in case anybody wants to go take that further. Please do. And I'm
and
glad our journey brought us there.
yeah, that was fun. And I'm all for, like, I don't see a problem like that one word, whatever it was, for self-love, right? I like there's no issue there, because if that word was used in ancient Greek, then you could easily just translate, you just be like self-love, you know, like there's kind of a translation for it. But the issue is when they use different words and just write love. And it's like, to the English reader, it's almost like you're talking past them, you know? It's like you're leaving out something really important here.
Yeah, and so I'm not a polyglot, definitely a polymath. Um, but one of my favorite experiences of many languages happened when I was receiving a haircut once from this Japanese woman. I should say Japanese American woman. She's born in America, first generation of her family to be born in the States. Awesome gal, and she was cutting my hair, and we always had these really cool conversations, So she was dropping wisdom, and as she's speaking, she just like seamlessly went into Japanese for a couple sentences, and then back into English. And I didn't stop her because I was really intrigued by what she was saying. But when she was done, I was like, "Hey, you like spoke Japanese for a little while there." And she said, "Oh, I did." She's like, "Oh,
Uh-huh.
oh." She's like, "Oh, you can't say that in English." She's like, "I wouldn't even know how to start trying to say that in English." And it really helped me appreciate, kind of as an outsider for those who speak many languages, like the gift of doing so. And I think I'm called in my type of need for learning and knowing and connecting dots and threads in this way. Like I'm really appreciating, I've been saying to myself for some time now, it's like, man, I gotta learn, like not only how to say these words, but like learn what they are and what they mean and where they come from. Like, so PK, I love that, or actually, like, kind of speaking of logos, it was a little bit more, I guess, logarithmic that brought us together, right? Like the math and the numbers, and I'm sure would agree with me that that's not a different thing, right? Like that's very much a language, and perhaps the root of all language and all reality, and all is number and such. But I really appreciate that when we connected, you just kind of went into this etymology and into the Greek right away. It's like, oh yeah, that's the place I need to be.
Yeah. And I hope that you and people in the chat will take something away from it. And what I'd like to do too is share with you, Brett. I have kind of a list of sources, my go-to sources that I go to, and that anyone can do it, and it might be daunting at first, to get into another language or get into the ancient Greek, but the first thing you need to do, print out the alphabet and memorize that and make the sounds, and from there and get you a Greek keyboard, which you could just download the language and kind of work with. But then with that Greek keyboard and looking at letters and typing them out also helps you become more familiar with it, because the sounds of the Greek letters, as they're on the keyboard, like for example, the P is the pi, and the R is the rho. And, in ancient Greek, the rho looks like the letter P, but it's R. But it is where R is on our keyboard. So you see what I'm saying? It helps.
Crazy.
Yeah, it helps you that way, because then you get familiar with like, oh, this P is really an R. If I'm talking Greek, it's the rho.
How many letters are there in Greek?
28 maybe. 24.
So are there a couple like blank spots on the keyboard, or what do those get replaced with?
Yep. There's some blank spots, and there's also like the I know one gets replaced with a semicolon, which I think maybe in ancient Greek, like was ancient Greek question mark. And then sometimes there's not, the letters don't translate one to one, like there's no Y. So typically the Y, when you, in this example, using it as a keyboard, if you type Y, you're going to get a epsilon. You're going to get a U instead of a Y.
I was just looking at my keyboard and seeing what kind of changes would be necessary to make it base 12 ready. I want to just put this. Venus Revive says, "Are we still heading to this windy tower right now? Is this class about etymology, logos? I love this class. Thank you." Yeah, I wouldn't call it a class at all. It's like a journey and a conversation. I was just like, "Big PK, like let's just have this conversation live." You
Yeah,
did just remind me though, Venus, that you love this class. That there is like a 10th type of love. It's called loving the YouTube. So if you're digging the video, please hit the like button.
hit the love button.
Right, hit the fill us button. It really helps the channel out. It'd be a great thing you can do for me. I'd very much appreciate it. There's a request here, and maybe we can do this before we end or another time. Can we talk about algol? I'm guessing this is. I like to say, the algol rhythm is kind of what we're up against. But that word, it's probably not a Greek word, right? Like most of the stars are Arabic names. Have you found your way yet to the Arabic, PK?
Very little, but yeah, there's definitely been pull to that. I feel, yes, there's a lot to be learned from the Arabic, 100%, but I'm not super familiar.
Utufalia. Thank you, Olive.
I
And
love
thanks
it.
for saying this, Stephen. All right, well, take us back on track, please. I took us on a strange tour.
Well, I think we could hit on this knowledge and understanding little
Mhm.
thread for a minute because I want to reference this guy named J.G. Bennett. Which, are you familiar with Gurdjieff? So he was a Gurdjieffian disciple follower, of Gurdjieff and his system. But if you could throw up my screen, if you don't mind, if you don't noose. So here we'll just start with the Bible. And so the story goes that the Bible, New Testament, was written in ancient Greek, translated into Latin, I believe, first, right? And so it's kind of like everything got, I like to say, like Latin washed. And so that's why a lot of our languages, even when you look at the etymology, is going to have links to Latin. And isn't it interesting that we uh, categorize living things in a dead language? Makes you think. So right here, you got with knowledge and understanding. This gets back to the Sophos, the Sophia. A lot of people are familiar with Sophia, kind of a Gnostic um, concept for, the mother goddess of wisdom, right? And so here you got the word fro. It's let's see, Frey. It's like Frono is the word here, but it gets translated to the Greek, or I'm sorry, the Latin as sensibus. So now we're talking sensible. And then if you know anything, and see how it's understanding up here in the KJV. Now, if you know anything about uh Plato, he is in the idea of forms. It's all about the intelligible and the sense and the sensual, right? The were the two different kind of worlds, the idea of forms. Um, so there's different words that get the intelligible and the sensible or visible world, right? There's different words that get translated. Let me go to this. So we got this all wrapped up into knowledge and understanding and wisdom. And I don't want to get started on, but there's a whole rabbit hole on how justice became righteousness and righteousness became piety in the Bible. So that's another tangent that I just want to lay on the table, and we might not even come back and talk about that. But this is what I wanted to share. This is from J.G. Bennett on the difference between knowledge and understanding. And this was the best kind of thing I've come across, and this is something I'll, probably think about for the rest of my life. So I'm not saying this is the answer or whatever. It's just something to think about. What he puts forward is that the difference between knowledge and understanding is that knowledge is something that can be uh, communicated but not transferred. And understanding is something that can be transferred but not communicated. Now, in saying that, it's very important that then I explain to you what is meant by transferred, okay? Because the idea is that when you're saying transferred here, the transferred is talking about from one experience to another. So think about it with once you understand astrology, or once you understand music theory, you can kind of see how they're related. And so same kind of thing too. Think about a mechanic. Think about a guy who knows how to fix a car. If he understands combustion motors and such, he could take that understanding onto kind of something else. And so the knowledge, or I'm sorry, the understanding there is something that's transferred, but he can't really communicate that because understanding is something that you come to on your own. People, what I like about how he kind of describes it is that you can communicate knowledge to other people, but then it's up to them to come to the understanding of it. So in that sense, you can't communicate understanding, you see, but you can transfer your understanding of something to something else, like within your own purview. And this here, excuse me, is interesting because goes on to say the fact that understanding can never be communicated is one reason why men and women can never wholly understand one another. A woman's understanding remains womanly and a man's understanding remains manly. There's no way of communicating it. So that's just another sort of to drive the point home, right?
Yeah, I mean, it almost feels like that's so individual as well, besides like that, the huge two groups that are being named there. I mean, I guess if you're a mechanic and you really understand how a combustion engine works and you can transfer that to something else, you probably could also, another mechanic could. So, like, you can communicate that as well with somebody who's kind of in that guild, if you know what I'm saying.
They already have an understanding though.
But
So
so, what was he saying that knowledge cannot be it can be communicated but cannot be transferred?
correct.
So let's get
So
an example of that.
yeah, and I like to think about polymaths. Okay, back in the day, there were a lot of polymaths. Why were there a lot of polymaths, do you think? Maybe it was because of the education that they received growing up, right? So think of the quadrivium and the trivium, right? When you teach a child in that manner and kind of show how everything's related, and what's astrology is one of the seven, liberal arts. And so is music and, geometry, arithmetic, and then you got grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Now, what is that? What's going on there, and why I think there is maybe more polymaths back in the day was because of this education, and it was taught in a way that connected the dots. We are now taught in a way that everything's so what's it called?
A specialist and therefore separate,
Specialized.
right?
Exactly, and
Yeah.
separate. So that understanding is not people aren't able to kind of see the dots to connect in their own way because they don't have necessarily understanding of something. They just have like the knowledge of why it works and why
Right.
it
And
does that.
it's
Mm-hmm.
often said that, oh, it's because we know so much more now that you used to be able to know everything and now you can't. And well, like I appreciate that. It is, I totally agree with what you're saying. It's because we're not also like taught in such a way that we see the common threads. Right. And I mean, that kind of brings us back to how you and I really connected over 12ness, like once you really get inside that truth of 12ness, the quadrivium, the harmony, the geometry, the astronomy. I mean, the number itself in some way, although like I'm still kind of stuck in like 10ness in my own personal arithmetic. And that word arithmetic, I think we lose so much of like the sacred. And it's just kind of like sacred numbers, how I think of that part of the quadrivium. But regardless, like I'm disconnected at the very roots of my own kind of quadrivium diamond. So like that, we keep saying that word just so people know. Like the quadrivium was number. It's number in time, which is harmony, right? That's like frequency. Number in space, which is geometry. You might prefer to hear the word sacred geometry, so you don't have a flashback to some math class. And then at the top, it's number in time and space, which is astronomy. And that doesn't mean astronomy is like better than the others, but it's composed of all of those things, right? And so for me, like because I'm like a 10 kind of base 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then we go to the next digit column, right? It's interesting because my harmony is very 12. My geometry is so 12. Once you start swinging a compass and play with circles and lines, like you just see that like there's 12ness in that design. That doesn't mean I can't draw 3s and 4s and 5s and 10s, but like 12 is just the natural expression from the two tools of the geometry of the compass and the rule. So it really is kind of at this root of number itself, where like if I can take that and like find 12ness there, these other things are going to blossom in a different way. But like the beautiful thing about the quadrivium is they do have that connection. My dog's trying to educate me. I still can't understand her, that I've been trying so hard. So anyway, yeah, that about the quadrivium, very important place of study. And so like in the course I was talking about, it's coming up, like I can't just talk about the houses. Like I'm not just going to say, this is what the third is, memorize, regurgitate that, apply that according to these rules. It's like, no, the third is down beneath the ground, right? The third is the place that the sun travels in the middle of the night or after that one middle of the night moment, right? And the third is 60 degrees from the first. And like we want to have that astronomy and that geometry in the understanding, because then like the nature of the thing shows itself. So you're not just reading something from a list, right? It makes sense, right? So we want to get down to that kind of root knowledge. And I feel like it's that kind of experiential understanding, which is, for me, that's what knowledge is. But it seems to me like I don't really like, I'm disconnected from the true meaning of these words, maybe.
Exactly. Well, that's that I'm hearing you say gnosis. I'm hearing you say gnosis. When you reach that inner understanding, that inner knowing, that you necessarily can't tell someone else.
Right.
You see how it's all connected, but you can't write a paper and explain it to someone. It's like you can only give them the knowledge, and it's kind of, they have to connect the dots themselves. Everyone has to. And it,
Right.
you can say it's all related, but yeah, that's why it's such an important inner journey.
Yeah, and so this comment would be something that so many of us are familiar with, I mean, for many, it kind of like we really get the crack down in church, right? But like the church I was in was called school. And these things like, hey, like, why is that? When we're looking at math, we're looking at fractions or even, and then often, I think sometimes this is because the teacher is not like deep enough in the subject to really be able to explain it. But also they have to get all the information done and get you to pass the test before we move on or whatever. But yeah, we so often get shut down when we ask why. And that's always my intention. I can't say that I can align with it purely, but like when I'm teaching, like I want to teach you what, what they say, like, give a man a fish versus teach a man how to fish, right? It's like I would rather just like show you the keys, and then you open the door. The temple that you're going to walk into is going to look a lot different than mine, right? But like it's these types of keys that history has shown, or so I believe, opens that door in such a way that it squeaks at the right pitch on your way, and so you just kind of get it. You know what I mean? And that's always the challenge when we're sharing about and trying to teach some of these. I don't know, this strange information.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this makes me think of another thing. Like when I go and try and look up, what's the translation of science?
Mm,
Give me the ancient Greek word for science. Well, there really isn't one. Because science is a Latin, came from a Latin term.
mm,
And so when you start digging into kind of what's science, it's comes from, there's a few things here. So one, have you ever heard of the term prescience?
yeah.
Prescience. So we could break that down, pre-science. So it's like the usually it gets translated or defined as a foretelling, a divination, even kind of thing. It's essentially like knowing before you should know.
Mm,
But again, here you could see how I'm using knowing. And it's like, are we talking past ourselves again? Because I'm talking about the epistemic knowing, not the gnosis knowing, when I'm talking about science. And then there's also this term that it was new to me. We have you ever heard of the word nescience? So it's like NE science.
mm,
So that's a term which essentially means no science, or okay, let's look up the definition. Define nescience. It is the absence of knowledge or awareness, ignorance. Agnostic. So see what happened here with the language. We are essentially nescience, which comes from not the gnosis, not the word the gnosis, but comes more from the epistemic knowledge, is being defined as agnosis, as agnostic. And we all familiar with the term agnostic because that's generally like, I don't know if there's a God or if there is one. I'm agnostic, which essentially means that you're ignorant, but no one would call themselves ignorant because that has a more of you know, a bad connotation, but that's essentially what you're saying. So just as there's different types of knowledge, there's different types of ignorance. Agnostic, I would put forward is maybe the worst kind of ignorance, because the gnosis is the higher kind of knowledge, you know, versus the epistemic knowledge, which is more of the scientific knowledge. Anyway, we can get into base 12 a little bit.
well, let's do that another time. I want to pursue.
Okay.
I want to pursue this Philadelphia thread, and then I selfishly have another question I want to ask you while I'm over here at. I just went to the Bible Gateway, and then let's spend a little time at the Tower of Winds on the way out. Although
Nice.
I'll have a lot more questions and answers there. Um, this is King James version, so there's two places in Revelation
Right.
where we hear about Philadelphia, and so this just tells us that Philadelphia is one of these are all places, right? This is like modern day Turkey, Ephesus, and so I wonder if we know like where that location is on Earth. But
So yeah, I'm not sure. This gets into the Bible translation thing. I'm not one to say that. I don't think what they're saying there is earthly things. I guess maybe that's one translation, but I think that Philadelphia is has to do with Isaiah, Asia, Assiah, which in the Kabbalah is the fourth world, which is the lowest world, which is Malkuth, Yesod, and what Hod and something else.
Right. So that these like might be places on Earth, but maybe are actually
It does say Lydia, right? I think.
in the seven.
Philadelphia specifically, I think the word on the street, the logos on the street is that it is in Lydia.
Yeah, so on the borders of Lydia and Phrygia, which like I can't hear those words without just hearing modes of scales. So a
Right.
city of Asia Minor, now called Alashir, or High City, with few ancient ruins. But yeah, I mean, are these physical places or are these kind of metaphysical ideals or both, or who's to say? It's been a long time since I've read Revelations. Maybe I should. But just to read this, so this is King James Version, write this to the angel of the church in Philadelphia. These are the words of the one who is holy and true, who has the key of David. Whatever he opens, no one will shut. And whatever he shuts, no one opens. That's intriguing. It reminds me of just like open books and closed books and statues, which, the open book says it's revealing the mysteries.
And a lot of people here too tie these seven churches with the seven chakras. And so read this as talking about opening and closing chakras,
Intriguing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to pursue that some more. I mean, I'm interested in just seeing what are other versions that you often look to
for
in like the Bible. I mean, you'll go back to the Greek, right? Like it'd be interesting to see what this looks like in the Greek.
I got the Greek pulled up here. It looks.
Let me share what you have.
So here, Google. Let me show you. Google Philadelphia Strong's.
What's Strong's?
It's a Strong's concordance. Their
So
Bible Hub.
This is good.
This site I like better. Than the previous site you had. Well, specifically when I'm looking at the Greek, I do like the other site, but just for English. So now here what you see is Philadelphia. You see the Greek there, and it looks like it's a 1-to-1 translation or a 1-to-1 iteration, transliteration. So you see that funny looking P is phi. The pH.
This is phi.
Phi
here as well, right? Yeah.
Phi.
Phi is like lowercase phi, right?
Yeah.
Know that just from the golden number research.
Yep. And so
this
it has
is
that
where they're
pH,
saying Adelphos means brother.
Exactly.
And so Philadelphia is the city of brotherly love, or just brotherly love, not the city, right? But this is where you're saying, well, is that brother? I mean, even if it's brother, does that mean like the member of a secret society, first of all? Or is it like, blood kin? And we should, I want to open this and just let everyone know we're talking brothers and sisters when I say that, right? So like they're looking at fraternity here, for example, right? But yeah, that would get tied back to, which they're not doing it here, right? Back to Delphi. And, on one level, is that Apollo's oracle, or do we take it back to Python before and the serpents? And
right, the Pythia. Yeah, exactly. I think that's what's so clever about using it to name a city. I think it's both. I think you can easily argue and say, hey, it's art, if you will. It can be translated however you want to. I look at it as maybe the inner knowings, the Masons, the dudes making Washington, D.C. look like the way it does. Just look at it from a map.
It's been a huge part of my study.
Yeah. it's more fitting. And so Philadelphia was essentially, you could say, you know, kind of the DC of its time, right? It
Definitely.
was the headquarters, it was the capital. Um, and so these guys who, you know, built DC the way they did, it's basically they were very much into the Greek. They very much knew this stuff. And so the oracles at Delphi were the like largest, I don't know, most popular that's given now, you know, down through history, uh, divine, you know, people that they would ask things, right? That gave oracle.
Yeah, and love for the Oracle is, I think, where I'm going to be with that. I can't wait sometime to get boots on the ground and really explore Philadelphia and try to crack some of the codes there. I'm just quickly looking for what passage in the Bible I am often quoting. Um, because there's, so let's see, is it Mark? Yeah. Mark 14:61. Let me go here because I think there's some Greek insights that are really going to be helpful for me. All right, well, I'll try to drive this ship. I'm all over the place backstage here.
Let's see, Mark
Okay, so
14.
Mark 14:61. Can I even do that here?
Yep.
Okay. So this is the bit where on the page before this, he's basically saying, you know, when the disciples asked Jesus where to prepare the Passover, right now that they're in Jerusalem, and he says, "Oh, follow the man bearing the pitcher of water." And we often kind of describe that as like the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And so that's like the what, but I think he tells us the when here. So this is basically Christ is now on trial and they're getting him to blasphemy in public so they can justify his crucifixion. And this bit, so the high priest asked him and said unto him, Art thou the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? And Jesus said, I am, and ye shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. I can only get to one particular translation for that to say, instead of the right hand of power, to say the right hand of the mighty one. And I think it's the New American, maybe. Let me just look at that real quick. And I can probably do that so we don't have to scroll around as much. Because my feeling is he's describing Orion here. Maybe this one isn't it either. You will see the Son of Man. Oh, hold on, let me do Mark 62.
Yeah, I'm seeing the Blessed One.
So this is what I'm trying to get to. Right hand of the power. Can you look that up in the Greek? Am I able to just jump to
right hand of power?
Right?
Dynamos.
And that would
So
mean like power.
all right, so look, check this out. Google. Oh,
will you drive?
yeah,
I feel like that's just going to make it easier.
But I
And
want to
friends,
show
we
you
know
how
you're
to
here
do
with
it.
us.
I want to
Discerning
show
Lights
everyone
asks,
how to
have
do
we
it.
studied Gematria? I have not much. I've looked a little bit.
Yes, I have.
Good morning from New Zealand. Hi, Julie. Glad you're here. And thanks for reminding people to hit or even gently caress the like button, depending on
Love that thumb.
your
Love
approach.
the thumb. So, okay, here's what I would do. Just to show you, I would go Mark. Oh, I'm sharing. If you could add it.
Oh, I see. I have to push that button.
If you don't mind. Okay, so Mark, I would go Mark 14. And really, I think what you want to see is 62. So I would go Mark 14:62, and I would say interlinear. Or you could just say Strong's, but that goes right to this. And so from here, I got the Greek.
Cool.
Yeah. And so here you can you can look and see how it says the right hand, right? So that's the Dexion.
Hmm.
That's right.
Right.
And
In
then,
astrology, we often speak about sinister versus dexter, right? The left-handed or
yep,
right-handed. Mm.
yep, exactly. And then here you got the word here for power is dynamos. So I could just open, I just click that. That's the Strong's Concordant, the 14, and it takes me to here. And so here's one thing you could see. This is a good example of that. The going back to the keyboard conversation we had in a Greek keyboard, the Y is the upsilon. So see here,
Mm.
the transliteration is do, but it's we don't know that word. We know the word dynamic,
Right. Yeah.
which is the root of this word, but it's not a U, it's a Y in English. Anyway, so that's the word that is the power. And I think it's interesting always to look at other words too, because man, the Bible is one of the most interesting. We'll just say there's a lot of hands and eyes on the Bible, and it was translated a lot. And so, even what I'm looking at here, I think it's important too to look at the Latin Vulgate, which requires a little bit more. The site I use for that, the Latin Vulgate, is Cross Bible. This is a really good one because you could look at the Latin. Remember, like I said, it went from the ancient Greek to the Latin Vulgate to blah blah to all the rest, right? And
Hmm.
so looking here, see, there's all the different Greek versions, which there's plenty, and then here's the Latin Vulgate, and from here we could go Mark. So I'm curious that I think this is important because I want to see what word they're using, because as we saw before, we saw sensibus being translated to understanding when it's more of like a sensual thing. So it was Mark 14, right? So
Yeah.
Mark 14,
1462.
yep. Then 62. So,
There's the right hand, the dexterous, right?
yep. And it's
But they're
this
saying of
word.
God there, right? Aren't they? How do you pronounce that? Dei?
Yeah.
Dei?
Of
Deus?
God. But that's, yeah, that too is what we're saying here. Son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. Interesting.
So my
So,
feeling and what I've shared 1,000 times is he's actually speaking about the sun, like in our age of precession. I can show an image, but on Orion's club, right, which is happening at summer solstice for the northern hemisphere places like Jerusalem in our day and age, right? It's kind of like a principal part of my
dude,
teaching
I
around.
love that. Yeah.
But let me
Yeah.
put an image on the screen.
I always talk about Orion in the summer solstice being on his club like he's carrying it in a torch.
This is, I mean, we'll just be wherever this is. Is this still on your screen? So
Yeah,
you'll
I
see
can
like some
see.
blurry stars.
Mhm.
It's just like Orion above a tree in Sedona. Um, I mean, I'm in like the middle of a presentation here, but you see Osiris and Isis and Horus down beneath, because it said that Osiris, right, or Asur, when he died and went through the Duat, he then became the stars in the heavens that most of us know as Orion. So I really appreciate like that image of like Pharaoh or specifically Osiris as like a
Mhm.
better image than the hunter, you know. Um, and in the Babylonian, like in the Mula Pin, those stars, or what we call Orion, was called the true shepherd of Anu. Anu being like on one level, like the god, if you will, of like the heavens, on another level being like the central heavens, where like Enlil is stuff that's really high. He was an air god, and Ea or Enki is stuff that's like low to the ground. He was an earth god, and Anu is like the band in the middle. So astronomically, it would be basically like the equatorial band, which is where Orion rolls. Um, but anyway, it said that Isis then later would become the star that we call Sirius, the brightest star of our sky, and they travel together. The sword of Orion, as we often describe these stars these days, would likely be the golden phallus that Jehuti or Thoth created so that Osiris, after he had been slain, and Isis could have an heir. So talking in the middle of a story, but that star in the middle of the three so-called sword stars of Orion is actually the Orion Nebula, right? Like, it's a really cool truth that when you look to that zone of the heavens, you're seeing this birthplace of stars, which modern day astronomers say is the closest nebula or star nursery to Earth, but that it's quite young. And the where astronomy dates this thing wouldn't work with what I feel is being told to us by many myths, is that this is where our sun comes from. Because these three stars that I'm triangulating in the lower left now, the 2 feet of Orion and the easternmost belt star, those to the Maya people are known as the hearthstones because they surround the smoke of creation. There's so much more in that just zone of the heavens, which feels as if it suggests that this is our place of origin. So there's Isis as Sirius, and we might think that Horus then would be Aldebaran, which is just on the other side of Orion. In fact, in Washington, D.C., there's alignments from the Capitol building. Orion's belt sets into the Lincoln Memorial where it is. Now Sirius sets into the Jefferson Memorial, which used to just be Potomac River. And then Aldebaran sets into the White House. But that's not Horus, right? Horus is the sun. So this is going back to a time when this lawyer, Julius Schiller, I think in the 1600s, like dusted the pagan off of the sky and created this Christianized version of the heavens. And I think equatorial is Old Testament and ecliptic is New Testament, maybe. I mean, interestingly, Orion was Christianized as Saint Joseph, right? So we get the father of Christ. And then
I didn't know
Christ
that.
would be the son, who Schiller just knew as like the sun in our sky, right? Like, we lose that in this kind of modern image of, I don't know, like Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, if you will. But when we bring it back to Osiris and Isis and Horus, to use their Greek names, nobody was denying the truth that Horus is the sun that moves through our sky, right? So I'm interested that Schiller seemed to be keeping that mystery intact. And the question would be, okay, well, who is the moon then? And I love that he's showing like Cassiopeia is Magdalene. If you know the myths of Cassiopeia, that's not like reverent, like honoring Magdalene, by the way. But his said that the planets of the solar systems have new names. Saturn is Adam, Jupiter is Moses, the sun is Christ, right? The Earth's moon is the Virgin Mary. And I often wonder if these three Marys at the crucifixion describe like the three phases of moon as, like, you know, the maiden and the mother and the crone.
Oh yeah.
It's the cycle. But anyway, here's this bit of go into the city, follow the man bearing a pitcher of water. And then this version, Christ remained silent, gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" "I am," said Jesus, "and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." And anyone that's been under dark skies like knows the clouds of heaven are the Milky Way, which
Totally.
cross the sun's path in two places. One is at galactic center, one's on the exact opposite side. In this place, the Lakota call this the sacred hoop of stars, and they say it's where our souls come from. And so in our day and age, the sun is now in the center of that hoop, which is the top of Orion's club at summer solstice, at North times. Like, that's what's unique to our day and age versus other times in precession, because now Earth's North Pole is leaning towards this place on the sun's path that intersects the Milky Way galaxy, here at so-called Galactic Anticenter. And my feeling has been that this these words from Christ in the New Testament are like telling us that this time in precession is so key. And then, by the way, I don't know if I even have it here. This seems like a different presentation, but I see all of that in the apotheosis of George Washington, which is the painting on the Capitol dome, right? A couple of presidents now have been inaugurated beneath, but it's like George Washington becoming a god. And if you look at that image, it's just that sacred hoop of stars. And Washington starring in two ways. One is like the Christ figure sitting on Orion's club, but he also kind of shows up where Betelgeuse, the star, would be. So sorry for that great divergence. But what I'm saying is it's kind of criminal for me to be writing the mighty one instead of power there, because it's only in one translation I've seen, and I can't even find which translation that is right now.
Well,
In the Bible Gateway, I should.
the Latin had it the virtuous, the essentially the Latin word for virtuous.
Instead of dynamo, or what was it?
Instead of dynamo. So the Latin had that. Now the look at the dynamo word, I think so it's good to look up it in a different context than, in my opinion, than just the Bible. Like look at the what's called the LSJ.
What's
And
LSJ?
it is the Lindell Scott something. But the LSJ is essentially the Greek LSJ. It is the ancient Greek dictionary, and
Okay.
LSJ. So kind of Elizabethan time periods. And funny story. Alice's in Alice in the Wonderland. His dad. So C.S. Lewis made Alice's dad off of one of these guys. I think it was either the Lindell or the Scott guy is Alice's dad. Yeah, that's just the, I don't know, fun, fascinating thing. But I wanted to say something about, well, okay, what was I doing? I was looking up dynamo and another thing. Look, so see here, you got power and might. So I don't think you're necessarily wrong for sticking with that power and might, because if you look at that Greek, it gets translated, it's that dynamis word, which is power, might, bodily strength.
Mm.
So it would make sense for Orion, right, the warrior, to that word is fitting. I think more fitting than virtuous. Really.
I was just going through different versions of the Bible trying to find the mighty one. And I didn't get too far because of this conversation, but there's one called the Amplified Bible. I wonder what that is. It looks like the copyright's 2015, so it's a pretty new one. But it says, "You will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power." But then in parentheses, they describe power as the Father.
Yeah. So I personally, I've found more fitting looking at the Greek and looking at the Latin than going to try and find an English translation to
Yeah.
kind of corroborate where your head's at. My thinking is like, go back to, I say original so loosely because like, who knows, right, at this point, but what they say is the oldest versions, like go back to that. And then I think there's a lot of things that's why too, I look at the the Old Testament, looking at the Greek Septuagint, which a different site for the Greek Septuagint is this LXX, or it's Blue Letter Bible. And so here it has lots of different versions, but here the LXX essentially means 70, is good for looking at the Greek. And this is important because when you look at the New Testament was written in Greek. So the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. But why this is sheds light on stuff is because you could see how some of those Hebrew concepts, words, what the 70 translated the Septuagint into Greek, and you can kind of, that's just another form of connection. So you can like look up dynamos in the Greek Septuagint and then see what that says in the KJV or whatever. It's just another way to go about it. The one thing I loved though about your Orion weave, your Orion thing, was this too. Argo Navis is, we're all in the same vicinity. Here you got Orion, right? And if you draw a line kind of through Sirius, through, it goes right through the, obviously this is the horizon. So where I'm at in the northern hemisphere, this would be at most of the time under the horizon, but it right behind Sirius, we got Argo Navis, which is, there's a strong case to say that's Noah's Ark, if we're talking astrotheology. So you could kind of see the progression here. I really like that.
Yeah, in Schiller's map, that's the arc. There were times in like really old different zodiacs where the sea goat was shown as a boat as well. And even when the crab was shown as a boat, which is pretty wild, but a lot of things seeming to refer back to that time where our whole species barely survived, right? The flood of it all. Well, PK, I could do this all day, but I got to go be a dad, as you mentioned before.
This was great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you had the courage to say, yeah, let's just do this live in front of a bunch of people. And thank you so much, bunch of people, for kind of inspiring this and moving us from one place to the next and sharing, amazing comments as you do. There's a bunch I wasn't even able to connect with that I look forward to seeing later. Whether you're seeing this, what I think is later or now, please do hit like and share this around if you think other people will enjoy this. I'm here live for StarryTelling Hour, 11:33 a.m. Pacific time every Wednesday. So do please come around. And PK, I hope to bring you around again. And I want to speak with you later. I'll reach out about bringing you into the Constellations community. Is there a place where people can find you online, or is there anything that you're doing that we should direct people to?
I do have a YouTube channel, and I'm really just kind of posting my other live streams. So you're welcome to go to that and leave a comment.
What's
there
the address?
Pretty sure it is at PK333.
Nice.
I should know better. I'm fairly confident it is. If it's not that, I will give it to Brett and he could put it in the description.
Yeah, it looks like PK333. No, that's some young kid. And I'm not sure where, but I might have just typed it in wrong. All right. Well, speaking of YouTube, I want to share a few things that I'm up
hyphen
333.
PK hyphen 333. Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, let me drop that in the chat. I'm still getting to the wrong place. Can you put the link in the chat?
Sure.
All right. Let me share my screen here. I got a bunch of things going on, friends. I mentioned this course before. There's like a week left where you can join it for so ridiculous cheap, like $25 for 5 classes. It's a sliding scale, so I hope if you have the means, you'll choose a higher rate. But if you're in my Constellations community, you will have already received this message. First of all, if you're in Constellations, remember that Amala Hall is teaching tonight on Aquarius plants and planets, astroherbalism, plants and planet correspondences. I'm so stoked that I'm going to get to make that one tonight. Tomorrow, I'm going to be on a panel speaking about Venus and the kind of involvement of Mars in the coming Venus cycle. So that's with Yulia Seamus of the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, Gary Caton, and Andrea Michelle Kennedy. And the CIA's YouTube channel is the place where that will be. So they're at Cosmic Intelligence Agency at YouTube, and we'll be live there tomorrow. So Thursday, February 20th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to be there promoting. I mean, we'll be dropping knowledge, or understanding or gnosis. I can't remember which, but we'll be promoting this, which is the next of a long going now 8 years of full Venus star cycle group of seminars where many of us will come together and explore Venus when Venus comes together with the sun. It's about to happen in March. So I hope you'll check that out. You can just go to the Cosmic Intelligence Agency homepage and you'll find this Venus Star series coming up. If you're on my mailing list, I'll be sending out some word about it. You can also, in your magic box, type in GeminiBrett.com/houses. And you'll be redirected to Synchronicity University. I'm so honored that Nadia Shah has invited me to teach this 5-week deep dive. I'll be sharing more about this in weeks to come here on StarryTelling Hour, but I think it's until February 28th where you can choose your own tuition rate, like literally as low as $25. And so head over here. You can learn more about the curriculum. As I mentioned before, some astronomy, some sacred geometry. There's going to be lots of myth and amazing things. It's going to be just an awesome class. So come on over, choose this $250 button if you want. I got a baby to feed. But I would love to see you in there, like regardless of what price you can pay. If $25 works for you, come on in. It starts on March 20th on the equinox. At 3 p.m. Pacific time. There'll be 90-minute classes, 5 Thursdays in a row starting March 20th. So I hope you can come in there. And PK started to turn this thing into an advertisement. Anyway, join us, friends. And also GeminiBrett.com if you want to learn more about Constellations community. I'm excited to have more investigations of Greek in that space if I can convince PK to come play over there as well. Thanks for showing up, bro. It's really nice to see you and to connect to the other side of this continent. And I look forward to many more conversations and teachings. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This was a blast. And thanks everyone for hanging out in the chat and smash that like and really appreciate what you do, Brett. Thanks so much.
And I'm looking forward to more. All right. See you in space, everyone. Bye-bye.